Second Thessalonians chapter 3, and he says, "For the rest, brothers, pray for us so that the word of Yahweh spreads rapidly and be praised also with you. As we know, the word of Yahweh is the name of the Son, right? As we see in Revelation 19:13, it clearly says that his name is the word of Yahweh, the name of the Messiah. So we have here, for the rest, brothers, pray for us so that the word of Yahweh spreads rapidly, which is what we should do, right? That's what we're doing with these studies, and hopefully each and every one of us, and be praised, right? The word of Yahweh must be praised. So he's not talking about the scriptures as the letter, but it's talking about the name of Mashiach who died for us, who deserves praise. So that the word of Yahweh spreads rapidly and be praised as also with you, and that we might be delivered from unreasonable and wicked men, for not all have believed. This is important to understand, because and I'm pretty sure, well, other translations would have faith here, for not all have believed. So, for not all have faith, right? And I just wanted to make that clear, so we understand that in Hebrew would be emunah, right? Which is the belief in the truth. And as we know, Yahushua, the word of Yahweh, is the truth. So, since they do not have belief, how can they accept and praise the word of truth, the word of Yahweh? No way. So we shouldn't be surprised by the fact that we preach or we teach others about Yahweh, about his name and the name of his Son, and not all receive it, because not all have belief, not all have emunah. So that, as it says, and that we might be delivered from unreasonable and wicked men, right? Because we will encounter unreasonable and wicked men. Sometimes even people who claim to believe, but it is not true belief, not true emunah or faith. For remember that faith without works is dead. So people who say they have faith or a belief, but do not act according to that, they are lying even to themselves at some point or a certain way. So not all have emunah, not all have belief, even though many may claim they do. And I say all of that because sadly, and well, I say sad because of them and because of the experiences, but during the time that we've had the congregation for now, well, a bit more than 10 years, I have seen people come and go that claim to believe, but then they show different colors, as they say. And we must ask Yahweh to be delivered from those inside and those outside, those who are not of his fold, pretty much. So, and that we might be delivered from unreasonable and wicked men, for not all have emunah. But the sovereign is trustworthy, who shall establish you and guard you from the wicked one. Right? The wicked one, meaning both these wicked men, but mainly Satan, who is above them, who is controlling them, because remember that we are in a war, in a battle against authorities, spiritual entities. So mainly the mighty one of this world, which is the wicked one. So thankfully, as it says here, the sovereign Mashiach is trustworthy, who shall establish you and guard you from the wicked one. So if we actually have belief, if we really have emunah, then we shouldn't worry, because the sovereign is trustworthy and he shall establish us and guard us. So the issue is with those who do not have belief. They are not established because the belief is pretty much the foundation for there to be an establishment. So we need to believe to put that foundation, the cornerstone. As it says, but the sovereign is trustworthy, who shall establish you and guard you from the wicked one. And we trust in the sovereign as to you, both that you do and shall do what we command you. Right? And that is part of the belief. We cannot expect anything else, for we must trust in the sovereign as to you, right? We trust in Yahweh and Mashiach that he will work on each and every one of those to whom we speak about the Father, right? To whom we preach. We cannot control what they will do. I cannot control what the congregation does. I cannot control what those who listen think, speak, and do. But I trust Yahweh will do the work in them if they have believed. And that's the point. That's why sometimes we find people that might claim to have it, but they don't. And then we realize that our trust in the sovereign was not enough because they did not have the belief to make the change. Because Yahweh is not going to use his power against the free will of somebody. He will respect everyone's free will, for it is his gift to humanity. And that is pretty much the point of this reality. So he will allow people, sadly, to make mistakes and even to go away from Yahweh if they have no faith, because that is pretty much what will establish them. As I said, the faith in Mashiach, who is the word of Yahweh. And we trust in the sovereign as to you, both that you do and shall do what we command you. And the sovereign direct your hearts into the love of Elohim and into the endurance for Mashiach. And the sovereign direct your hearts into the love of Yahweh, for that is the first commandment, for us to be able to fulfill all commandments. And the sovereign direct your hearts into the love of Yahweh and into the endurance for Messiah, the endurance, right? Which is what I was mentioning, or not the same word, but same concept regarding having a foundation to be established and remain in faith, trusting Yahweh, so that we may receive what he has for us. So we must endure, we must persevere, as it says in the scriptures. He who perseveres till the end will be saved. And in fact, before that, it says, and you will be hated for my name's sake, the word of Yahweh. But he who perseveres and endure till the end will be saved. So, and the sovereign directs your hearts into the love of Yahweh and into the endurance for Messiah. But we command you, brothers, in the name of our sovereign Yahushua HaMashiach. But we command you, brothers, in the name of our sovereign Yahushua HaMashiach. So it is Mashiach through them, through the ones he sent. In this case, Shaul. But we command you, brothers, in the name of our sovereign Yahushua HaMashiach, that you withdraw from every brother who walks disorderly and not according to the tradition which you received from us. So look at that, because of what we were talking about, right? As how there are people who have no belief, and some of them claim to be brothers, sadly. So we must be careful. And I know that, well, I'm sure some of you, because remember, of course, the congregation where we teach in Spanish is a bit bigger than this one, right? We're still working on this one. And it has grown, thankfully, to the Father a lot. So there are a lot of people who are from different countries who only know each other through WhatsApp and stuff like that. And even then there are issues, right? Some people have issues with others because of what some might say in a group. Some may misinterpret, or some may understand either way, there are issues. And it also happens, of course, in the congregation over here, where there are some who are present in the studies, right? So there are also, we also find issues there, or we've had issues in the past with people that come and claim to believe, but their actions are not according to what Yahweh commanded us. So they act disorderly. And that is when we must be, watchful, not to go with them or fall with them. And mainly, obviously, talking about the sheep of the fold, right? Who may go after a woven sheep clothing, thinking it is a brother. And that's why we must be careful and also understand these writings, these commandments from the messengers of Mashiach, because there's a reason why they are written. And what I mean is that, sadly, because of, well, it's a good thing. Innocence is a good thing. But in this reality of evil, if we are not wise as serpents, innocence can play a part in being fooled, sadly, right? So we must use wisdom, and we must need scriptures. So with this, we see that this will happen within the congregation, and we shouldn't be surprised that a person who claims to be a brother all of a sudden shows his or her true colors and is not. And then not to be surprised or think something about the doctrine or the congregation as a whole, as some people may end up doing for the actions of one person. That is the issue with that. And that's why we must clean up the congregation and be careful about everything, like this verse says, so that people won't talk against the name and against the true doctrine because of the actions of some who claim to believe it but do not act according to what is commanded, right? So I hope that's clear. So I'll repeat this. But we command you, brothers, in the name of our sovereign Yahushua HaMashiach, that you withdraw from every brother who walks disorderly and not according to the tradition which you received from us. In another version, another translation has they, where it says, which, well, yeah, it says here, which you received from us. There's a translation that says, with which he received from us, and another one that says, which they received from us. Either way, the point is the doctrine, right? They all received the same doctrine, but they went away from it. They were disorderly, so we must withdraw from them. And it is also important because the enemy will come using the idea of not being merciful, of not being a good brother, of not being not having love for the brother, right? If a person withdraws from another one from the congregation who claims to believe but is working or walking disorderly, I'm sorry, I keep clicking to highlight it, but then something comes up and so yeah, I'll just stop doing that. But we command you, brothers, in the name of our sovereign Yahushua HaMashiach, that you withdraw from every brother, right? Some would say, how can you command that? That is not being merciful. That is not trying to help your brother. But if that brother is walking disorderly, that means he doesn't have true faith, and that can be an obstacle. It will be an obstacle. Reason why this commandment is given. So we should see this verse when that thought about why would you do that? Why would you leave that brother? Comes, because the enemy will also use that against us. The fact that Yahweh told us to love our brother, to love the neighbor, to love the enemy. But we should be careful not to let the enemy or a supposed brother who has no faith, therefore is no brother, become an obstacle. We should help when possible, if possible, but not go with them in the apostasy or in whatever disorderly ways they are walking. So that you withdraw from every brother who walks disorderly and not according to the tradition which you received from us. And by tradition, it's pretty, I said I wasn't gonna do it, is pretty much meaning The doctrine, like I said, remember that in the Talmud, which is what they call the oral Torah, right, where they get the true, according to them, interpretation of the letter of the Torah. However, the true interpretation of the Torah, we find it in the New Covenant. In fact, that's why they made the Talmud, because they saw the competition, right? So they try to do something similar. However, it's a mess. So the Talmud is supposed to be explaining the Tanakh, and is filled with traditions, opinions, commandments of men. On the other hand, the so-called apostles, right, the messengers of Mashiach, they gave us the true interpretation next to everything that Mashiach said through the good news of Matthew, Luke, John, and Mark. So we have in the New Covenant the true explanation of the Old Covenant, or the true fulfillment of the Old Covenant through the Ruach, and not by the letter, which is how they wrote with commandments of men, the Talmud. So we have here that we must walk according to what the envoys of Mashiach said and wrote, which we received from them. So, for you yourselves know how you ought to imitate us, for we were not disorderly among you. Once again, very important, disorderly, not to be disorderly. For Yahweh is a mighty one of order. So we should be careful in our lives, in our thoughts, in our words, in our rooms, in our house. We must have order to be a good example, a good representation of our mighty one. For you yourselves know how you ought to imitate us. For we were not disorderly among you, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. Very important, because there are people who, obviously, there will always be people who need help. But if they have faith, if they are actually doing everything that they have to do, then they deserve that help. However, there are some who just expect the help just because they are in a congregation, for instance, but have no faith, no works, and they are just there for the food, for the ride, for the good time. So actions like this could happen. Nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it. If they are saying it, it's for a reason, because there are some people who would do it, right? They would expect to be fed and all of that without doing anything in according to the will of the Father. Nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it, but worked with labor and toiled night and day in order not to burden any of you. Right? So in their example, they should find a way, they should find the image of how to act, serving others, working at all times, not to burden anybody as much as possible. Not because we do not have authority, but to make ourselves an example for you to imitate us, right? Confirming what I was just saying. As it says, not because we do not have authority. So, and this is interesting as well, because if a leader in this reality, right, in this world, and because of the flesh of those who follow, if a leader serves too much, is too humble, all of a sudden, some people, those who are not truly his allies, his talmidim, right, his disciples, they would find that as a weakness. So they would actually see it as something bad and take advantage of that person, humility and all of that. So as Paul is saying here, not because we do not have authority, So some would think that they did not have authority because of what they were doing, or because they didn't expect anything, or because um, they were working night and day, because they expect authority not to do anything, to be right, to receive everything, to everybody to do everything for them. So he has to make it clear, not because we do not have authority, we have the authority, but we needed to act that way, doing everything just to show you an example that even when having authority, you have to serve. In fact, the more authority you have, the more willing to serve you should be. So not because we do not have authority, but to make ourselves an example for you to imitate us. For even when we were with you, we commanded you this: if anyone does not wish to work, neither let him eat. That's a very important verse. I mentioned it a lot, actually, in the congregation. And not that there are a lot of people who act this way, but because there have been examples. And because some, obviously, just like with every person who has a different weakness than the other, there are some who have that weakness, people who just don't like to work. And it's understandable, because some work, the work of this reality is not nice. Exactly. In fact, as I always say, it's actually a curse. So it's understandable not to like it, right? Because it was the curse given to Adam for eating the fruit of knowledge. So it is a curse. It's understandable not to want to go through it. But the more you accept it, or the more you believe in Mashiach and act according to his will, the more he will free you from that type of work, or at least from that feeling, to help you deal with it, as he says about his burden, which is light, right? And his yoke, which is gentle. So he will make it better no matter what it is, and even take you out eventually from it to give you a work in his kingdom, right? A job in his kingdom, which in Hebrew there are two words for work. One that refers to that type of work in this world, which is painful. It's a bone, pretty much the word when Adam was cursed. And then we have another word that has to do with work, that is more about ministry, which is one that has, in fact, as a root, the same as the word malach, right? Which is translated as angel. So it's pretty much when you become a messenger of Yahweh in this reality to establish his kingdom. So that is obviously the best, but only those who actually have faith and work for Yahweh with all their mind, heart, loving him, will be led to it, to find it, to um, start doing it, pretty much. And I mean, whatever ministry Yahweh gave each of those in the congregation. But there are people who do not want to do any work. None of the two. So that's an issue, because as that reason why this verse is written, people would go to the congregation, and I'm sure in Shaul's time it would happen, and that's why he's writing it, and expect to be fed just because they are in a congregation that is told to love their neighbor. But we are told a lot of other things that we need to respect and do. And if you break one, then you cannot expect what is promised for those who fulfill it. So people need to understand. Yet the point is that those who do not work pretty much do not understand. And that is the issue. Only those with ears to hear will understand and do the work, right? So my point is, with all of that is being said here, and well, we should work to be an example and be willing to work in whatever it may be to give honor to Yahweh. And Yahweh will feed those who are willing to work. So for even when we were with you, we commanded you this: if anyone does not work with you, if anyone does not wish to work, neither let him eat. Neither let him eat. And there are other translations. This one is particular because I'm sure some people would say, how can you say not to let him eat? Like, are you going to keep food from someone? How can you be so mean or evil, whatever? Well, if they do not wish to work, they are making the decision not to be fed. They are making the decision by not working because Genesis says that you will work for what you eat, right? That was it. You will eat with the sweat of your brow. So if you don't work, then you don't eat. And that's why this confirms the Torah, right? What is written in Genesis. And it shows that Yahushua did not come to destroy the Torah, but to fulfill it. And the envoys of Mashiach explain the Tanakh. For we hear of some among you walking disorderly. For we hear of some among you walking disorderly, not working at all, but are busybodies, right? They were pretty lazy, doing everything except work, except that which needed to be done. For we hear of some among you walking disorderly, not working at all, but are busybodies. But we command and urge such through our sovereign Yahushua HaMashiach to settle down, work, and eat their own bread. Their own bread. That means they were eating somebody else's bread. And that is the issue. Because if you work and still not have enough, then you can be helped. But if you don't work, then how can you expect any food? And you, brothers, do not grow weary in doing good. And you see what some people would call a contrast, right? Because he's saying neither let him eat, but then he says, and you, brothers, do not grow weary in doing good. Doing good, since we are in the way of Yahweh, the more we get closer to him, the more time, the more we do, could cause one to get weary, right? To get tired, because we're walking and walking and walking in the way of Yahweh if you're actually doing something. And that's why Yahweh tells us, but do not grow weary in doing good. We will receive the payment, the reward in its time, in due time. So we shouldn't grow weary. And you, brothers, do not grow weary in doing good. And if anyone does not obey our word in this letter, note that one, and do not keep company with him, so that he is put to shame. So you see how in the middle of all of this, we have this, and you, brothers, do not grow weary in doing good. Those who do not understand it will see this and be like, but what do you mean? You are keeping food away from somebody who needs. You are saying not to keep company with brethren. Where's that? Where's the love in there, right? That would be because they do not understand righteous judgment. They do not understand justice. And most likely they don't like to work. So they're trying to excuse their actions or lack of action. So, and you, brothers, do not grow weary in doing good. So doing good would be staying away from that kind of company, not walking with those who walk disorderly. Doing good, do not grow weary in doing good would be to work and not to give food to those who don't work and don't want to work and just want to be fed by your work. So that's why, amongst other things, of course, this is right in the middle. And then he continues, and if anyone does not obey our word in this letter, right, everything that is being said, note that one, right? That is also interesting, right? Because it is pretty much to point someone out from the congregation and keep an eye on that person, because through not obeying this letter, that person is showing unbelief, right? Lack of faith, and therefore is one of the ones mentioned above in the letter. So we must know that person and do not keep company with him, so that he is put to shame. So when he realizes he's standing alone and nobody in the congregation wants to be around, then that person will be ashamed of himself. And hopefully that shame will make him fix his ways. However, do not regard him as an enemy, right? Very important. Do not regard him as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother, right? Because as we've been seeing, he's talking about people who are in the congregation, but are not acting according to the commandments. So we must first try and check to see if the person is or is not one of us. And one of the ways is obviously not regarding him as an enemy at first. If he's not an enemy, if he claims to be a brother, we need to treat him like a brother. But if he's being disobedient, then we should stay away from him, and hopefully that'll make him change. And if he asks, we need to explain and help him, for he is a potential brother, or he may be just a brother who is not knowing what he's doing. So very important not to put him in the place of an enemy. And even though we know we must love our enemy, the way that love would manifest is different from the neighbor to the enemy. So that's why it says here, do not regard him as an enemy, but admonish him as a brother. And the sovereign of shalom, right? The sovereign of peace himself give you peace always in every way. The sovereign be with you all. The greeting of Shaul with my own hand, which is a sign in every letter, thus I write. The favor of our sovereign Yahushua HaMashiach be with you all. Amen. And that's how the letter ends.